I remember being a little boy in Sunday school. And this story, the story of Isaac's conception and birth, came up. And I had a couple of Sunday school teachers who really liked to scold. And old Sarah, she was getting it. Why did Sarah laugh? Why, foolish Sarah, did you laugh? Faithless Sarah. How could you? You never ever laugh when God makes a promise. So why did Sarah laugh? I've told some of you this before. Why did Sarah laugh? Because it was funny! Duh! It was funny! Look at this situation. This situation's a little nuts. You have to remember some things. First of all, this God of Abraham, this was mostly Abraham's God at this point. Everybody believed in multiple gods. Even Abraham probably believed there was other gods. He just had this God as his main God. And Sarah would have family gods. And so far, even though Abraham would come back with these tales of talking to God, well, this God had been all talk and little action. Yeah, you're going to get a lamb, God said. You're going to get a lamb. They're wandering shepherds. Anywhere they set their tent, they can say is their land. You're going to have descendants like the sands on the seashore, like the stars in the sky. Hello, Lord. Have you noticed anything? We're old. It hasn't happened yet. We're too tired to try. The well's gone dry. Oh, and your people will be a blessing to the nations. What people? What people? To this point, for Sarah, this God of promise just seemed to be full of hot air. Oh yeah, they'd gotten through some scrapes. They were starting to do well financially, but why was Sarah to think that this was all because of Abraham's God? It could have been because of one of her gods. Heck, this God of Abraham didn't even have a statue. And seriously, today when these three guys show up, our Bible tells us this is God, or God and two angels. Somehow this is God. Sarah did not have a Bible to read along with as this was happening. And the Bible says nothing about these fellows being extraordinary in appearance. What if they showed up just looking like Manny, Mo, and Jack? Why did Sarah laugh? Forgive me, Lord. Well, why wouldn't she? She had had a bitter life of unfulfilled promise. Be glad she laughed and didn't spit. Asking her to believe now, it's almost cruel. Abraham had questioned along the way. He had scoffed his share of scoffs. How could Sarah not question if she was still part of God's plan? How could she not wonder if she was indeed part of the promise? Sometimes it's just hard to believe. After he was humiliated in the 1981 presidential election, Jimmy Carter had lots of reasons not to believe. His 4 years in Washington had been rocky, to say the least. His biggest problem was Iran. Iran had rebelled against its dictator, a dictator that historically had been supported by the United States. They took American hostages and they would not let them go. Then the energy crisis hit, and we had cars lined up for blocks trying to get into service stations, drivers hoping for just a few drops of fuel. And then we had inflation, and this inflation tore the economy apart. Now, there are arguments that this was not all President Carter's fault. But let's face it, presidents are like quarterbacks. When the team is doing well, they get lots of praise, probably too much. When the team is not doing well, they get too much scorn. But those arguments weren't holding water in the presidential election, and even now, many greet talk of the Carter presidency with something of a snort. Carter had every reason to go home, lick his wounds, hide, retire. What he did was everything but that. Instead, Carter began working to create the world he envisioned beyond the role in government. He became a champion of peace and of human rights, and he founded the Carter Foundation to carry that torch. He began fostering grassroots efforts to address American poverty and American homelessness, and he became the one Habitat for Humanity volunteer that most of us can name. He became an international voice, speaking out for the rights of women and of girls. He taught Sunday school almost every week. He's teaching today, by the way. I checked the schedule. Say a little prayer for him. And he walked away from his beloved Southern Baptist Church on principle, because they would not ordain women. He had every reason to give up. If someone had said to him, your best days are ahead of you, he could have scoffed. If someone had said, hey Jimmy, God's still with you, maybe he was a little justified if he wanted to kind of go, oh, get away. If someone had said, by the time you're done, almost everyone, Democrat or Republican, is going to be able to look you in the eye and say, you just might be the best former president this country has ever had. Well, I'm sure that would have made him laugh. Even today. Hard. But he kept walking in faith. A faith that told him God was not done with him yet. And now he's got cancer. And it's bad. But he just keeps chugging along. The problem with the story of Sarah, we concentrate on Sarah. That is a mistake that Jimmy Carter, in his own story, did not make. Sarah had every right to laugh. She had given up. But the promise of God was still there for her. And that promise that she was going to find was going to be real. She would find she was not so old, not quite so washed up. She would bear a child, Isaac, whose very name means laughter. Doubtless informed by this story, good Sunday school teacher that he is, Jimmy Carter kept moving, kept believing, and because of his work beyond the presidency, we can all say thank you for a world that's at least a little more peaceful. You know the saying, it's not about you. It's not all about you. It's a good saying. Most of us can stand to repeat it occasionally. And when we start wondering to ourselves, wondering, do I have a role in this world? Does God have any kind of plan for me? Can I make a difference? We need to recognize two things. First, good question. It's a good question. If you've never asked it in your life, you're probably just not paying attention. And second, yes. The answer is yes, but you have to remember, it is not all about you. The promise of God is to be there in the attempt. Not to plan your life out every jot and tittle, no. The promise of God is to walk with us as we seek to spread the joy and the love of Christ. The promise of God is to help us to be God's hands and God's feet if we will only try. Because in the end, it's not all about us, it's about God. And what I will promise you, because we do get something wonderful out of this, what I will promise you, and the promise comes from God, is that if you serve, you'll see. We are called to live for others, a life of the kingdom, a life that claims that God is indeed present for us. But maybe you're sitting there today and you say, okay, Pastor Mike, that all sounds good. But how do I know what you're saying is true? How do I know it's even worth the effort? Because if you haven't noticed, Pastor Mike, it's a lot of not so nice things going on in this world. And there's a lot of not so nice people out there. And it seems like it would be a little wiser to just take care of me. And I'd say, why don't you tell me how you really feel? But then I'd say, look in your heart. Look in your heart. You know, there are people out there who say that we're just dust and water that got thrown together by time because time just didn't seem to have anything better to do. And sometimes it sounds like kind of a compelling argument, but look in your heart and you'll see. You'll see that we are not just dust and spit. You will see that flicker of God inside of you that, for lack of a better term, we call spirit. And you'll see, if you look at your life, the times that you were happiest are the times your spirit was being fed. So feed your spirit. Do the things that bring you joy, because that joy, that comes from God. But then feed your spirit in this way as well. Work for justice. Work for mercy. Walk humbly with your God. Care for that kid at school who doesn't seem to have anybody that will talk to him. Speak the word of kindness where no kindness is to be found. Write that letter or that article or that play that says the oppressed deserve life. They deserve freedom. Feed the hungry. Even when there are voices saying, you know, those hungry there don't deserve to be fed. No, feed them anyway, and then love. Love, love, love. And you'll see it's true. You'll see we are part of God's plan. And that plan will bring us meaning and peace.